Welcome everybody. I feel grateful to be here. I felt grateful first thing this morning when I got to look out at the ocean before I came to work this morning. I don't normally get to do that. I do have beautiful mountains in Tennessee and beautiful fall colors, but I feel very grateful for the view that I got to start with this morning. So I want to talk to you about how we align our supports to ensure a portrait of a graduate success for Oakridge schools. But first I want to start to tell you just a little bit about me. Now, before I sent this slide in, I didn't realize how many partnerships Studer had with Kentucky schools. So you'll see that I got a little orange going on there. But I've met a lot of wonderful neighbors. Had I known there'd been so many Kentucky schools with Studer, I probably would have put our Alabama win picture in there so that we could all celebrate together. Just kidding, just kidding. All friends, but this is me and my crew, and as Dr. Creel said, I'm the Executive Director of Teaching and Learning in Oakridge Schools, and let me just lay out for you what we're going to talk about today. I'm going to tell you a little bit about Oakridge Schools, and then I'm going to talk to you about our portrait of a graduate. Before I do that, we heard profile portrait used a lot on the stage already this morning. Can I just see a show of hands? How many of you have or know about portrait or profile of a graduate? Oh, good. Okay, I'm in great company. Well, then I'm going to talk to you about how did we align our supports to really ensure that our portrait is a success. Dr. Greco was absolutely correct. It can be a thing, it can be a beautiful poster, or it can be something that you live and something that you do. And we really want it to be something that we live. So I'm going to talk to you about how we support our portrait so that it is something that we do. So first, a little bit about Oakridge Schools. Oakridge, if you don't know anything about Oakridge, it was created during the Manhattan Project. So it did not exist. It's known also as the Secret City. It did not exist until 1941. And then it was nowhere on a map. 75,000 residents lived and worked in Oakridge on a secret mission, which was the Manhattan Project, and nobody knew about it for a long time. What you see in the picture here are the Calyatron girls of Oakridge, a famous photograph by Ed Westcott, who we lost last year. He's done amazing photographs of the story of Oakridge. But these Calyatron girls sat and worked, and they were actually splitting the isotopes in the uranium. Didn't know what they were doing during the day. The scientists found out through some testing, PDSAs back in the 40s, that females were actually better at doing this when they got to a problem. They didn't stop and try to figure out lots of different ways to fix it. They immediately got up. They had a process that they followed that was well deployed. They got up and they went to their manager and said, this is the problem. And problems got fixed much quicker with the females doing it. Plus, the size of their hands made all of that work a whole lot better as well. So these are girls who would have been recent graduates of high school that were separating isotopes and had no clue what they were doing. So if you ever come to Oakridge, we are now a national park. So sometimes when I get bogged down in the world of public education, and we've talked about the hardships in public education, I now can turn around and say, well, where do you work? I work in a national park, and I just start from there. It's a very strange and different introduction to Oakridge. All right, so Oakridge Schools, a little bit more about Oakridge Schools. We have 1 preschool, 4 elementary schools, 2 middle schools, 1 high school. We have about 4,600 students. We've been growing rapidly over the last 2 years. I don't know if any of our California visitors are in here, but we've taken a lot of California students lately. It's really, that's the most of the crowd that's been coming to us, so it's been very interesting, but we are growing. And we have almost 600 staff members at this point. All right, so let's talk a little more. Since I know a lot of you have familiarity with the portrait of graduate, I'll skip ahead just a little bit. This is our shiny poster piece. You can see our vision there at the bottom. We mean it. We want every student prepared for college, career, and life success. And we started our partnership with Studer at the same time we had this big idea and we wanted to launch our portrait of a graduate. Our superintendent, Dr. Bruce Borchers, had a strategic plan called Oakridge 2020. This was the year 2019, and so we said, Oakridge 2020 is about to sunset. What's next? And we had heard a little bit about Portrait of a Graduate and were interested in what that might look like for us. So before I go any further, I want to give you an opportunity to talk at your table. Our portrait of a graduate is a shared understanding of the key skills and competencies that students exhibit to predict success in their future. But I don't want you to think about it quite that way yet. I want you to think about your child, or your grandchild, or your niece or nephew, or that really important child in your life. Hold that picture in your mind of that child and think, what do I want my child to have before they leave the school system? So let's take just a minute, turn and talk to your neighbor about what are the most important key things. Try to take it down to the matchbook size. If you could only write this list of key competencies in your matchbook, what would be the key things that you want your child, your niece or nephew, your grandchild to have before they exit the school system? So let's take about 2 minutes. Turn and talk to your neighbor about that. All right, if we could bring it back. All right, for those of you who are able to summarize using a word or two, what's something really important that you think is essential for that child you care for or care about deeply? What's essential that they have before they leave their K-12 experience? Anyone? Just a shout out. Curious. Yeah, the ability to transfer. Yeah, critical. Any others? I know we have some common lists around the room. So this is what we did. This is how we started. We said to all of our staff members, we said to all of our community and our families, what is it? What is it that you think are the key essential things for Oakridge schools to provide the students that pass through our hallways? I'll talk to you more about that process in just a moment. First, I want to tell you a little bit more about our why. Again, I just told you we were transitioning from our Oakridge 2020 strategic plan into what came next. So we wanted to be able to really connect those dots and have that clear, concise communication. I'm feeling a lot of synergy and alignment with the people who are just on the stage. So I'm glad I'm bringing these points to you following that. I feel very fortunate. We also really want to identify those key competencies at each level. So you're going to see something a little bit unique about our portrait of a graduate. We talk a lot about how to bridge the transitions between pre-K, elementary, middle, and high school in our district. And then, of course, simply, we want to achieve college and career readiness for every single student, and we felt like this shared vision was a way for us to do that. So what makes our portrait a little unique? It's probably a little less unique right now. Remember, this was 2019 when we launched into this work. And we were really excited because we heard our community and our staff. And they said, it's a lot more than academics. It's a lot more than that state test. It's that thing we've been talking about all morning in here. So our portrait of a graduate is comprehensive, and it does contain more than those academic attributes. Also, what is a little bit unique about our portrait is we have progressions by level. We didn't just do portrait of a graduate Oakridge schools. We said, what does a graduate of pre-K look like? What does a graduate of our elementary school look like? What do the graduates of our middle schools look like? We created a lot of buy-in that way, and we're really able to get granular on that vision and be really clear about the articulation and alignment of those really specific skills all the way to high school, so it wasn't just a high school thing. Everybody owns it. I was shocked at how excited our preschool teachers were to be involved in this effort in creating this portrait of a graduate. I can't tell you how many times they came to me to say, thank you for letting us tell you what a graduate of our place should look like. We think that's really important. We know what kind of foundation we are creating for everybody else. So it was an opportunity to help those teachers at every single level feel heard and feel like the work that they're doing is equally important in this portrait of a graduate work. So here it is. This is our portrait of a graduate, the pillars that we ended on. And again, I'll talk to you about the process a little more of creating this as we talk about supports. But we have the college and career ready, every student academically prepared for success. This is where that state test stuff falls, yes. But another measure of success under our college and career ready pillar is the ASVAB, are the other things that kids need for success all along the way. Our second pillar, the 4 C's, the critical thinker, communicator, collaborator, creative. We heard some of that just a minute ago. Career options, this is where we dive a little more deeply into career options, those industry certifications. We heard about some of that yesterday and the importance of looking at alternate career paths for students. Our community said digital citizenship was really important to them, and I'll tell you how that has kind of advanced in our work as we have moved from 2019. And then Life Ready. Boy, we didn't know in 2019 when we said, you know, these things like empathy, self-awareness, and self-discipline are really, really, really important. We didn't know that that was going to be multiplied by 1,000 very soon, and it was. So we were very grateful that we felt we had already gotten a start on some of this social-emotional learning work prior to the pandemic. Now we still have a lot of work to do, and we still see the increase in incidences in extreme behaviors that have been described at the conference these last 2 days. But we do feel like we had some tools in place already to help us move in the right direction for that. So we were happy to have this in place. So this is our complete portrait. Now we do have another level of this portrait that you can see on the Oakridge School's website, where it actually outlines the vertical alignment of all of these skills pre-K through high school. All right, so let's talk about all the supports we need, and we need a lot of supports to make this more than a poster. Part of that will be dreaming big and doing the hard work. I'll talk to you a little bit about leadership and ownership, and then we'll talk about the measures of success that keep this work moving forward. So first I want to acknowledge some supporting structures, again, pulling from our stage this morning. The critical importance of both internal and external supports. Internally, we had also started learning and growing around this continuous improvement process. We had some opportunities, select group in our district had some opportunities, both teachers, administrators, and district personnel, to learn about the PDSA process from Carnegie. And we started planting that, small seeds we were planting in one elementary school, and thinking about, you know, how do we make this grow and spread and scale across our district. Also internally, we've made lots of use of technology tools, so I'll share some more information about that. But we really had to take some time in examining what's working and what's not. Before I left for this conference, on Tuesday, we had one of my absolute favorite meetings in our district. It was our Principal Data PLC meeting. It's a quarterly data meeting where our principals come together and we review our scorecard measures, and they kind of present about where they are in their continuum of work and what their short cycle action plans are for the next quarter. It's a really fun meeting to attend. But what I noticed at the meeting this time is that I had a lot of school leaders saying, well, we're not going to abandon anything. We're adapting this, we're adopting this, but we're not going to abandon anything right now. We just got to keep going. We're doing the work. And I heard another one, but we're not going to abandon anything. And I heard another one, we're not going to abandon anything. And so I was reflecting after that meeting and if we don't abandon anything, aren't we going to have too much on our plates? That was certainly confirmed in the conversations that have been held here at this conference. And we talked about, I talked to someone here about how could we change the words that we use. How can we think about, if abandon seems like it's a negative thing to do, how can we think more about what's working and what could we let go? So that's coming up next in my work around this examine what's working. It's continuous improvement for sure. Another internal supporting structure is collaborative leadership, getting our principals on board. I have to thank our student partners for helping us with that greatly. They offered us a great supports and resources in terms of helping our leaders get on board. About the same time that we were building our Portrait of a Graduate is the time that we launched our 9 principals training with our school leaders. So powerful, because we spent the time doing strategy and culture all at the same time and really emphasizing the balance and the importance of both, and it certainly led to really fast improvement. Our external supports include student education, our community resources. We're still in a science community. We have access to the Oakridge National Lab, and so we have some really great partners in the work that we do around education, and we have really great community support. Oakridge is located in East Tennessee, and my years of teaching were in a neighboring district. And then I worked for the university for a while, providing supports for lots of districts in East Tennessee. And what I found when I landed in Oakridge is the community support for education. It's a neat little pocket, and we're very fortunate to have people that value education in the community. So I now know that it's my responsibility to continue to tell that story well as the narrative changes across the country, so that we can keep that reputation and that level of support in Oakridge. And then also crashing in about the same time are our pandemic funding opportunities. And my superintendent, Dr. Borchers, sat down with all of our executive team and our principal leaders and said, what you heard here, number one, I don't want to go backwards. We already are a one-to-one environment. We already have the framework for this portrait of a graduate. How can we thrive during this time? How can we get better during a really challenging time? And so we engaged in that conversation a lot with our school leaders. In addition to that, he turned to our school leaders and said, and we've been given a funding opportunity that we may never see again with some of the federal ESSER funds coming through. How can we use these funds to be several steps down the road? How can we advance with these funds? I don't want to use these funds so we can catch up and just be okay. Again, we're never going to see this. We may never see this kind of funding again. So how are we going to responsibly use this funding to really make an impact on Oakridge schools? All right, dream big and do the work. We collected over 1,200 community survey responses to what do you think? What's the most important thing? What are the key competencies that you want your child to have in the Oakridge school system? We had an amazing response from our community. And then our principals all engaged, again, with the help of Studer, engaged in wonderful feedback cycles with their faculties using common language and keywords to bring all of that feedback to us. We finished that feedback cycle on right before spring break, March 2020. And then everything closed down. And I have to say, for this work, that ended up being a little bit of a blessing. So if you have anybody in your district that's engaging in this kind of work, know that they need some time. I had never worked from home before, from a home office before, but when I got all of those responses back and started to try to pull the themes, I felt like I was writing a dissertation again. It was a lot of work and it was a lot of hard work, but because I had that unusual gift of a little extra time with all of the craziness of the shutdown, I was able to really pull through those themes, those strong themes of what our community wanted from our school system and our teachers, what they wanted as well. So dream big and do the work, or if you are the person in charge, create the space for that work to be done. It's a lot of work to get that feedback. Along with that process, we started to have to think about what are the supports. Okay, we've built this portrait of a graduate, as you see. Now what? What are the supports that we need to make this work, and how do we know that it's working? Those were our next two questions. How do we really deploy this so that it, again, is not just a poster on the wall? And so we went pillar by pillar with our academic coordinators and our principals and our teacher feedback cycles, and we said, what does success even look like? If every student is academically prepared, what does that look like? How do we measure that? What tools do you need to make that happen? So some of that is still going on, especially in the pillar of digital citizenship. We're still engaging in that work this year, making sure that we're measuring what's important and that we're providing the tools that teachers need to do this work well. All right, again, talking about the importance of leadership and ownership, I can't emphasize enough how well the 9 Principles training partnered with this kind of strategy work. It was really easy to integrate training our principals on rounding while we are also talking about the strategy of key words that we want to use with our Portrait of a Graduate rollout. it made for some really powerful conversations in our schools. We, at that time, had not engaged, not had much turnover at all. We still are more fortunate than our neighbors in terms of teacher turnover, but we have, for the last 2 years, hired larger groups of new employees than probably ever before. So now we engage in those 30, 90-day interviews with our brand new employees, and it's a strategy also, an opportunity to talk about strategy around, hey, do you know about our Portrait of a Graduate? What have you learned about it so far? What supports do you need to continue to do this work? So it's very much about integrating the strategy and the culture work together for our school leaders that have been most successful in this work. Another piece, and I talked to you about, okay, we've got this amazing funding, what are we gonna do? What are we gonna do to make a difference? Another big piece of that was our PLC structure. Again, knowing what works, just how can we get it done? If you had asked teachers in Oakridge schools, they were doing PLCs. What Solution Tree says is that's PLC light, what we were doing. We were acknowledging it, we were saying it, we were using a couple of the key words, but we weren't asking those, drilling down and asking those really important questions as teacher teams meet together. So we thought about how could we really ramp up this PLC piece? And we used some of our ESSER funding to provide a PLC coach in each school. This is a teacher that was pulled out of the classroom. That was a big decision. We want our strong teachers and our strong PLC participants to lead these groups, but man, you don't want to lose that direct instruction from a strong teacher in the classroom. But it was a great teacher leader opportunity. And we also have a PLC coordinator at the district level so that that group can come together on a really regular basis and talk about their keywords and talk about their strategy and talk about their culture and make sure they're doing those common things in all of our buildings. So our PLC coaches in each building were tasked with several things. First, we really started on that collaborative culture piece. We had to build the culture of those PLCs. Now, we did have a few PLCs that were already high functioning, so they moved straight into the strategy piece. How can we make what you're doing even more efficient and even more powerful for our students? And how can we take what you're doing and scale it across our district quickly with the network of our other PLC coaches? I have to say, thus far, this has been one of the most successful change agents in our district. We have a school who needed the right leader, and that happened. We put the right leader at that school, and then with the power of leadership and this PLC coach, she in 15 months has really shifted strongly the culture in that school and doubled the achievement of that school that was really suffering. But she really would give, the leader, the principal would give credit to this PLC coach as the power of making sure the work is continuing on, that people are living the work, and that it's not a poster on the wall. So it's been really effective. Again, important for us to have learning and integration in all of our processes. So we took those 4 PLC questions, starting with what do we want all students to know and be able to do, and we started to integrate for those high-performing PLCs that PDSA cycle. And we said, where does it live? We worked with our PLC coaches first, giving them some training on the PDSA cycle. And we said, where does this live? Well, this lives in questions 3 and 4. How do we respond when students are not proficient? How will we respond when students have already reached mastery? That's where we want your PDSA cycles to live. And we just tested the waters a little bit at first. We've got really wonderful, we've got the right people in those PLC coach positions. So go to your high-performing teams. Let's just try it out. We don't have to have lots of fancy forms. We don't want to get lost in filling out the forms, but let's try testing something. Don't get stuck in the education trap of plan, do, plan, do, plan, do, plan, do. You're the PLC coach, so you go in there and make sure that the study act is included in that cycle of learning. So I'm happy to say, we don't have this all the way across the board yet, but I'm happy to say we're well on our way. This is growing in a really authentic way in our district. And every time our teachers get results, it grows and grows even more because it's working. right, so where are we going in this journey? We're going to continue to collectively evaluate our practices for effectiveness. We want to make these action plans for change. We want to use data to make improvements. But most of all, we need to hear the best practices from the teachers in the classrooms and find better ways to spread and scale those. Yesterday, I heard some conversation about how do we get them to take what's working and implement it in their classroom with fidelity. And I'll tell you one tweak we have made to that. Fidelity, just like abandon, was a negative term for some reason in our district. So we made one tiny switch to try to mirror some of our core values. And instead of using the word fidelity, we said, would you implement this with integrity? And by integrity, we mean, could you take this and not add a lot of personalization to it for a little while? Try it out as it's meant to be. Let's talk about it with our PLC coach and our PLC team. And then we'll take that teacher expertise that you have, the knowledge of the particular classroom that you have, and then we'll start to say, what personalization does this need for you and your setting? But we talk about integrity instead of fidelity in our district now. And key words. It seems to be making an impactful difference. So it's a win for us. All right. One more thing that we've done to align supports to ensure success. And this, again, we're continuing to work on this piece, but it's really thinking about the measures that matter, what we heard on the stage this morning. Those measures that matter can drive the work. And we're very careful. We have lots, we did this on Tuesday before I left. We have lots of conversations about that careful balancing act between accountability and what that word means and having too much pressure. So we ask our teachers lots of questions. We remind our principals to do rounding around these measures that matter because if you didn't meet your SMART goal, nobody's coming into your classroom with a stick. That's never happened. We have to remind people that there's not a big red fire button sitting down in the principal's office. If you don't meet your goals, then you sit down with your PLC team and you talk about strategies to improve. The work continues. I posed the question to our principals, what happens when you get data that you didn't expect to get? I was really excited when their answer was, we sit down and try to figure out why we didn't get the answers we thought we were going to get, and then we make a plan to get to the answer we thought we were going to get. So we just continue to do the work, and we have to emphasize that. Accountability can feel very heavy in the classroom, and we don't ever want that to translate down to our students. All right, so here's a quick look at one page of our district scorecard. So this would be, you can see on one side our college and career ready, some of our indicators. Of course, we would put things like graduation rate up there, success rates. That has to do with our state assessments, but we have the ability here to drill down because our state assessments have been a little less than dependable. So we use quarterly district-wide benchmark assessments that we finally found one that aligns well with our state assessment so that we can have that real-time data and those quarterly conversations. I was also really excited that a theme in our Tuesday data meeting this time was, gosh, I noticed at this grade level, their formative assessments aligned with that quarterly benchmark really, really well. So they predicted that their kids were going to do this on the quarterly assessment, and they did it. But in this grade level, we were way off. We said the kids were going to be here, and they performed here. So a lot of action plans. I heard a lot of action plans from our PLC coaches and our principals on Tuesday about how do we better align our formative assessments with our benchmarks, with the end goal. And that doesn't just happen on that huge common academic piece. That happens all the way down. You see our ACT, our Ready Grad indicator, which includes industry certifications and dual enrollment, dual credit opportunities. And then you'll see on the other side our STEM metrics. So again, part of the process here in making this work, in making this what we do, was thinking about When we talk about the 4 C's, what is it that are the opportunities in the classroom? What are the opportunities in our classroom we are creating to let students engage in the 4 C's? Our teachers said, well, we've done a lot of learning around problem-based learning. We do PBLs. We like to create these opportunities for kids to engage in learning. So when they told us that, we said, well, okay, we are a Cognia certified STEM district. Our schools are Cognia STEM certified. How are they measuring the 4 C's and the use of these problem-based learning activities? They have a rubric where they give measures around community, learning culture, experiences, and outcomes. It's a really great, it's a really great certification process because they come in and talk to teachers and students. So we really have the student voice in this measure. So we said, yeah, let's use something in this case that we already have. There's no need to create something brand new. We already have this metric. You don't have to get recertified every single year. So on the off years, we'll have our STEM teams in each school come together and do a self-evaluation of the school. They're strong enough and competent enough in this work. They've done training in this work, and they can provide opportunities at the school level for areas that they know need improvement. So far, that's working really well. So that would be an example of one we already had in place and just borrowed. You see social emotional learning, one of our indicators on there. Again, just before the pandemic, we were exploring social emotional learning curricula, and our counselors were having really great vertical conversations across the district about what kind of tools they wanted to use and how they wanted to align that work. So we had a little bit of a head start, but in this particular measure, we knew we needed the voice of the student. So that is an indicator that is a student survey on social emotional health. Second time, we've given it twice so far. The indicator on the scorecard is nice. Looks fairly good that we're at the midpoint already, or the midpoint in the situation we're in. However, what's meaningful, there's so much power in that survey that we've given to students and what our counselors and what our principals have been able to do with students, the programs that they've created for students and for parents. It's really making a difference in our schools, and it's really a way that we can say we are living our portrait of a graduate. And then you see other indicators like attendance and chronic absenteeism. What we're really excited about here is finding something to help us measure. So when I talk about aligning supports to help you with your portrait of a graduate, we tried 2 different tools and failed too slowly. We tried 2 tools, two companies that said, oh yes, we can measure everything for you. Oh yes, we can put all of your things into one system. Oh yes, we will create everything that you want. And it did not, and it did not, and it did not, and it did not. So not to offer any plugs, but just for assistance, we did launch into some work with PowerBI, and because we can own all of that work and craft it to look exactly the way that we want it to, that so far has been the most successful thing we've done in our scorecard adventure. And again, still new in the process of getting our scorecards up and running, but this was the first quarterly data meeting where our principals received the data inside their scorecard mode and they could slice down to the kid level. Our vision for this is working all the way down to that warning system or that unique dashboard that can drill down to every single student individually. You know, we have great data work in all of our schools, but we have assistant principals that create Excel sheets that are about 3 miles wide. So you know how useful that might be in a PLC setting. So we want all of that data to show up. That's our vision, to show up on a screen, just as we heard about yesterday, so that teachers can access that really, really quickly and make the decisions and have the great conversations that they need to have during their PLC time for that work. So those are the primary supports that we are using right now to keep this work going. I'll conclude with, it takes a lot of support. It takes constant work. It takes an executive team and a principal leadership team willing to sit down and say, how are we doing on this? How could we get better on this? Not say, well, we can't do anything else. Not say, well, we can't let anything go. You have to really carefully examine what you have in place, what you need to keep, what's being successful, what you need to let go, and student-centered. Student-centered is the way to design all of this work. All right, so my contact information is here, and are there any questions about portrait or scorecard or supports?
A lot of hard work, you know, goes into what you just presented, right? I mean, I know it's and still a work in progress, but I think what always hits me as I watch the creation of using common strategies, but really connecting it to what's important to an individual district. You all have been through that setup, right? It's just you've had to take the time, first of all, to get the input, build the right structure and the connection of the dots. And how exciting that you just had kind of your first meeting to look at some data to really start that improvement cycle with your leadership teams. And then you'll continue to just progress to that. But my guess is, if I was listening right, I mean, that was like a 2-year process. Is that right? Just to get all the pieces and parts and support systems in place in order to really launch to execute for that continuous improvement approach. Is that fair enough?
You are correct. That is fair. Lots of hands in the work, lots of hard work. And it is my superintendent who has the patience in this work. His wisdom of and ability to wait on what comes next, because he can see further down the road quite easily. And my colleague, who is the executive director of school leadership, and me is with teaching and learning, sometimes we are the ones moving too quickly. Actually, we're a good team of 3, because there are times when some of us say, maybe we shouldn't do that yet. We evaluate the time and the pace, but it does take some time to develop that. And at the same time, we want to really carefully look at each process that we put in place so that it is authentic, it has feedback, it has learning. So it takes some time. Thank you.
So I will say that Kelly and the team at Oakridge are what you've seen today with the portrait of a graduate and how they're having those conversations with their principals and how that's really making the conversations actionable in their schools. They are now embarking on what that looks like for the organization, the departments, and really making this an organizational excellence scorecard. And as they drill down into what is it that's working from a business services standpoint, or what is it working from maintenance and operations. And in November, we're going to go through this very same process with departments as we teach them the same kind of conversations. If these are the goals that we're aiming for, how are we going to get there with our actions? And so great work going on in Oakridge. And I encourage you, as we've heard throughout the last couple of days, if you're looking for a place to go and look and see it in action, I encourage you to go visit at Oakridge. So at this time, Kelly, thank you very much for today. Please join me.
Thank you.